We are still looking at animals that God used to speak to or to get the attention of people on this earth when they weren't really listening or they weren't paying attention. Good morning. This is Pastor Ernie Lewis of the Blue Point Church in Sisney, Illinois, with your thoughts for Monday. We know that Satan used a serpent in Genesis to beguile Adam and Eve, but he's not the only one who can use a serpent to do his bidding. In Exodus chapter 8, Moses has been sent to speak to Pharaoh, the greatest leader of the known world in that day, and God wanted him to demand that he release God's people, those Israelites. Well, Pharaoh demanded a sign that they are to come from some powerful God, so God calls for Aaron to cast down his staff, and it becomes a serpent right before their very eyes. Pharaoh was not impressed by this. Actually, he called for his sorcerers and magicians to do the same thing. And, of course, they did. They cast down their rods. They became serpents also. But in Exodus chapter 8, the Bible says, "For every man threw his rod down, and they became serpents. But Aaron's rod swallowed up their rods. And Pharaoh's heart grew hard, and he did not heed them as the Lord had said." God displayed his power before Pharaoh and even before his magicians here. While they were using their illusions or bringing snakes about from their staffs, Aaron's serpent ate all of them. And we have to realize today that God is all powerful, just as he tells us he is in his word. I love the way Old Testament characters referred to God by calling him the true and living God. We need to see him in that same way today. When others are following some latest craze in religion, we know that our God is still on the throne in heaven. Pharaoh was so filled with pride that he thought his magicians were just like Moses and Aaron, and maybe they displayed the same kind of power in their sorcery as these men did. But God was trying to make a statement to have his people released from captivity in Egypt. The sad thing is that Pharaoh doesn't remember Joseph back in the day, whom God used to bring great riches to his country and to his nation many years before this. So Pharaoh refuses to listen to God and to Moses. He even denies their demands for the Hebrews to be released. Perhaps Moses and Aaron thought this display of God's power would convince him. So the Lord said to Moses, "Pharaoh's heart is hard. He refuses to let the people go." Sometimes today, we deny to see God's power in our lives, or we refuse to listen when he calls for us to do something. Despite God's miraculous use of the serpent to overcome the sorcerers, they denied that God had that kind of great power and that they should bow before him. You know, we should not need some miraculous reptile to show us that God is all-powerful. And it is my hope and prayer that during this coming week, we would be listening for God to speak to us in some normal way, not even extremely extraordinary. And however he displays his power, we should bow before him as the true and living God and hear that which he has to say to us.